In the headlines this hour, President Park Geun-hye replaces 4 senior secretaries in a widely anticipated shakeup brought on by the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. A cabinet reshuffle is expected to be announced tomorrow. The Bank of Korea decides to hold the key rate steady for the 13th straight month, but says it's watching the impact of the April ferry disaster on the Korean economy. And as we count down to the kickoff of the 2014 World Cup, we look at Team Korea's task ahead and the marketing buzz it's creating in Korea. Hello and welcome. Thanks for tuning in. In a shakeup of the presidential office that we knew was coming, President Park Geun-hye replaced nearly half of her senior secretaries on this Thursday. The moves are designed, her office says, to push forward with the president's government as well as economic reforms. Choi Yoo-sun introduces us to the president's new secretaries.
President Park has named Gender Equality Minister and former ruling Saenuri Party lawmaker Cho Yoon-sun as Secretary for Political Affairs. It's the first time a woman has been named to the post. The presidential office expects Cho's parliamentary and government experience to help her act as a bridge between the two sides. Ruling party lawmaker An Jong-bum was named Secretary for Economic Affairs. The tax, finance, and welfare expert played a key role in devising the president's election pledges. He is considered the right choice to lead the president's 3-year plan to revitalize the local economy. Former prosecutor Kim Young-han was appointed Secretary for Civil Affairs. Citing his contributions to establish law and order, the presidential office expects Kim to restore discipline in public service and to deliver public opinion to the president without filters. And former president of Seoul National University of Education Song Kwang-yong was appointed Secretary for Education and Culture. The president's close aide will likely be given the task of not only reforming the country's education system, but relaying the president's policies to the recently elected progressive education superintendents. While replacing half of her secretaries with close aides, President Park has confirmed confidence in the chief of staff, who has been criticized for the presidential office's recent series of personnel appointment failures and the government's lax response to April's ferry disaster. What's expected now is a reshuffling of the president's cabinet. While that announcement will likely come before President Park's overseas trip next week, uncertainties linger as controversy mounts over the credentials of her prime minister-nominee. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now getting to President Park Geun-hye's second pick to be her new prime minister, he's found himself embroiled in controversy just like the president's first nominee did. Comments he made a couple of years ago have surfaced and are casting doubts on his confirmation prospects. Na Hyun-kyung reports.
During a lecture at his church 3 years ago, Prime Minister-nominee Moon Chang-guk said Japan's forced colonization of the Korean peninsula in the early 20th century was part of God's will to awaken the Korean people. He added God also divided the two Koreas and that if the Korean peninsula had been an independent state at the time, the South would have settled on communism. At a lecture the following year, the nominee put his ultra-right views on display again, saying Korea was able to enjoy economic development by adopting technologies from Japan during the colonial era, adding that it was a geopolitical blessing from God. He also said Korea was liberated from Japan not because of the people's independence movement, but because it was granted to Koreans by the will of God. In response, ruling Saenuri Party floor leader Lee Won-gu said he believes the comments were not ill-intended, but a small group of junior lawmakers from the ruling party has called on Moon to step down. The opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's co-leader An Chol-soo also called on President Park to withdraw Moon's nomination, saying it would be the right decision if she doesn't share his views. The man in question said it was regrettable that his comments were misinterpreted, but at the same time seemed firm that he had no intention of apologizing. Na Hyun-kyung, ARIRANG News.
It was the main opposition party's turn on this Thursday to address the National Assembly, with their new floor leader getting straight to it, putting inter-Korean relations as well as government reforms center stage. Kim Myung-gil has more.
Addressing a full National Assembly on Thursday, Park Geun-hye, floor leader of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, called for an inter-Korean summit as soon as possible.
The National Assembly should create a special committee that will focus on preparing an environment for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula.
Park also called for reviving past agreements with North Korea, such as the September 19th joint statement of 2005, which calls on Pyongyang to give up its nuclear programs in exchange for economic and political concessions. The floor leader also pushed once again for a thorough investigation into April's ferry disaster.
An investigation without boundaries is the order from the people. The very first task for the National Assembly in the second half of the year is to conduct a thorough probe into the Sewol-ho ferry tragedy.
Park made a case for comprehensive reforms in the government and parliament, saying failures in the government system were one of the causes of the accident. She also sounded the alarm about the nation's aging nuclear power plants.
A nuclear power plant disaster is like an atomic bomb. The nuclear industry has been tarnished with corruption scandals, which sets the stage for a major accident like the ferry disaster.
The main opposition floor leader called for anti-corruption bills targeting high-ranking government officials to be swiftly passed at the National Assembly. She said that Korea's bureaucrats have long enjoyed landing jobs after retirement at companies and public institutions, which has contributed to the lax management of safety regulations. Park also pledged that the main opposition alliance would make Korea a better place to live by reducing youth unemployment, household debt, and the growing social income gaps. Kim Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
The Bank of Korea has kept its key rate at 2.5% for the 13th straight month. The central bank says it's keeping a close eye on the impacts of the April ferry disaster. Hwang Ji has the details.
Concerns over the ferry tragedy in April are spreading as it's slowing down the pace of Korea's economic recovery. While deciding to keep the key rate steady at 2.5% this month, Governor Lee Ju-yeol said Thursday that Korea's central bank is keeping a close eye on whether the ferry disaster will have a long-term impact.
If domestic demand picks up in the near future, I believe the economy will grow as we expected. We are closely monitoring the possibility that the ferry disaster will have a negative impact going forward for a longer period of time.
In its latest growth forecast, the central bank said the domestic economy will grow 4% this year. Based on the circumstances of the outlook, Lee made it clear that any future monetary decision would include a rate hike. Nomura analyst Michael Na, however, downplayed concerns of the ferry disaster and said the current key rate is very accommodative for the economy.
Export has picked up, but recently because of the ferry disaster, it seems like things have sort of halted, but I think that's only a temporary issue.
Na added that there could be a rate hike in the cards for Asia's fourth largest economy, which is heavily dependent on exports.
We do think that the global economy recovery is starting to accelerate, and we think that a timing of a rate hike will be sometime in first half next year.
Now, all eyes are on the central bank's next move in July, when it will release a new growth outlook and give a clearer indication for the path of a rate change. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
As the Korean won continues to gain strength, the country's export prices fell to the lowest levels in over 6 years in May. And this trend is likely to prevail for the time being. Our Yoo-Rian explains.
Korean exporters saw their profitability decline for the third straight month in May as export prices fell to their lowest level since December 2007. The figure stood at 86.8, which is a drop of 1.6% from the previous month, according to the Bank of Korea. That means exporters were earning that much less when shipping out the same amount of products. The drop is attributed to the strengthening Korean won. The won rose 2% against the greenback last month when Korea posted a sizable current account for the 26th straight month. Foreign stock investors also helped push the value of the won higher as they brought the Korean currency to buy local shares seen as safe investment. Experts say the won is expected to keep strengthening against the dollar in coming months, given that the United States has no plan to increase interest rates anytime soon. Even then, they don't see any major decline in the country's exports.
A growing number of exporters, particularly conglomerates, have grown largely immune to currency fluctuations. And research results since 2000 show that the country's exports are not negatively affected by exchange rate changes. So I don't see much immediate impact on exports from a stronger won.
Ha adds, however, it's a different story for export-dependent small to medium-sized companies whose profitability has worsened since the global financial crisis in 2008. That could signal a widening gap between mid-sized businesses and conglomerates. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chae-ri for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on ARIRANG TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. North Korea and Japan have been cozying up of late, but the United States says Washington and Tokyo still agree on the fundamental importance of a nuclear-free North Korea. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said Wednesday the chief nuclear envoys from the two countries held very productive discussions this week in Washington on a wide range of issues related to North Korea. She said the meetings reflected the close cooperation between the U.S. and Japan in denuclearizing Pyongyang in a peaceful manner. Psaki refrained from commenting on Japan's thawing ties with North Korea, but did add Washington remains in close consultations with members of the six-party nuclear talks. On this Thursday, the 2014 FIFA World Cup Brazil is kicking off in the capital city of Sao Paulo with the opening game between host country Brazil and Croatia. Our Song Ji-sun gives us a rundown of previous games, how the Korean squad may fare this time, and even how the Korean economy stands to benefit from the global event.
The World Cup is back in the country that has won the trophy 5 times already. With Europe taking the past 2 World Cup trophies, South American footballers are eager to bring it back home. But how will Team Korea fare? Looking at past World Cups, they presented us with the miracle of finishing 4th at the World Cup held at home back in 2002, but they haven't been so brilliant since. In Brazil, their first match against Russia will be pivotal to boost the team's confidence and to earn game points ahead of Belgium and Algeria. As all matches are scheduled to start in the early morning hours here in Korea, it will be difficult for a lot of people to watch them along with friends and some cold beverages like in years past. While restaurants and bars may not be seeing much of a rise in revenue, television manufacturers stand to benefit as people take this as an opportunity to upgrade their TVs so they can watch the games in higher definition in the comfort of their own homes. But of course, the official sponsors will likely see the biggest returns. Hyundai Motor Group is the only automaker among the 6 FIFA partners, and to maximize their return on investment, the World Cup itself must be a hit in terms of viewer ratings.
Both the US and Europe have less than a 4-hour time difference with Brazil. That makes it easier to attract potential market consumers to watch the games. Hyundai and Kia Motors have been launching new models in the US and Europe from March to July, which can maximize the promotional effect coupled with the World Cup.
Analysis by Hyundai and Samsung Research Institute suggests that if Korea advances to round of 16, the nation can expect $1.3 billion worth of brand publicity. But if they don't make it past the group stage, the effect will be a mere $450,000. Song Ji-sun,
ARIRANG News.
Animal predictions for the Brazil World Cup have begun to challenge Paul the Octopus, who became a huge hit after his uncanny forecast during the 2010 World Cup. The host country Brazil got a vote of confidence this time from its chosen turtle tipster. Son Jung-in has more.
A 25-year-old loggerhead turtle swims slowly across the pool. The male sea turtle named Big Head was given a choice between eating a fish hung from a Brazilian or Croatian flag, the two countries to play in the opening match. The turtle chose the host nation Brazil to beat Croatia. But will Big Head prove to be as credible as Paul the Octopus, who correctly guessed the results of 8 World Cup matches 4 years ago?
We held the event just for fun. We organized the event to raise awareness of the sea turtles that are on the brink of extinction.
Over in Peru, shamans held a ritual of their own with t-shirts of South American and European squads, brews, coca leaves, and skulls, wishing for strength, health, and determination of all football players. They reached out to ancient Inca gods for answers using pictures of famous soccer players like Brazil's Neymar and Argentina's Lionel Messi.
Brazil will be the one to raise the cup, but they will have difficulties along the way as they will face tough opponents.
The Peruvian shamans predicted that Brazil will meet Argentina in the final and asked all South Americans to root for their land until the end of the tournament. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Talks between the EU, Russia, and Ukraine have yet again broken down over a gas price dispute ahead of a looming deadline. For more on this story and others, so we have Paul joining us from the News Center. Paul, tensions between Moscow and Kiev continue to strain any diplomatic solution to the crisis in eastern Ukraine, and I'm sure this issue is no different.
Absolutely. After more than 4 hours of intense negotiations in Brussels, energy representatives of Ukraine and Russia failed to reach a deal to supply natural gas to Ukraine. Russia's energy giant Gazprom has threatened to cut off supplies unless the government in Kiev pays its outstanding debts worth billions of dollars by June 16th. The two sides have been locked in talks after Moscow withdrew a gas subsidy following the ousting of Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych in February. On Wednesday, Russia offered a discount of $100 for every 1,000 cubic meters of gas, but it was promptly rejected.
As for the possibility of another session of negotiations, we discussed that issue today, of course, and we agreed that future meetings would be possible after the parties see some movement, desire to approach the position of the other side, and after the payments have been made for November, December, and partially April and May.
The European Energy Commission, which is brokering the talks, said all three sides have agreed to further hold telephone discussions over the next 48 hours. Kiev paid about $780 million of its gas bill at the start of last week, but has since said it would only pay more when an overall deal is struck.
I see. Now, moving on to the latest in the auto space, Toyota has announced a massive recall, again, of its vehicles over safety concerns over airbags. How many cars are we talking about this time?
Well, Toyota company officials say almost 2.3 million vehicles will have to be recalled worldwide, most of them sold in the United States. The models that are being bought under inspection include Corolla and Camry sedans and Tundra trucks. It's the second time that the world's largest automaker has issued a recall over faulty airbags, which could potentially fail to inflate in the event of a collision. The defective airbags were made by Japanese firm Takata, the world's #2 manufacturer of auto safety equipment. Toyota expanded its recall because Takata said it had discovered record-keeping errors at a Mexican plant between 2001 and 2002. Over the last 5 years, more than 7 million vehicles equipped with Takata airbags have been called back worldwide. Also on Wednesday, U.S. safety regulators at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration opened an investigation into vehicles equipped with Takata airbags.
And heading back to the World Cup one more time, metro workers in the city of Sao Paulo have promised not to strike, at least during the event. I'm sure many football fans are relieved, to say the least. Are we looking at a smooth start to the World Cup now?
Well, not exactly. Though the Sao Paulo Metro Workers Union voted no on a strike action, they're still pushing ahead with protests across the city. They'll be taking to the streets on the day of the opening match on Thursday between Brazil and Croatia. Wednesday's decision comes as the host country faces widespread disruptions to public transportation. Attilio Fontana, the president of the Workers Union, said they were prepared to take the next step.
Tomorrow we will be out to protest at 10 a.m. starting at the union. We don't want to fight. We don't want trouble. It is going to be a peaceful protest with the principal theme being the readmission of fired workers and also obviously related to the World Cup.
The striking workers are pushing for a 12% pay rise, though the state subway company has made a counteroffer of 8.7%. Other groups, including teachers and bus drivers, have also staged strikes in recent weeks to demand higher pay ahead of the games.
And FIFA's embattled president, Sepp Blatter, has confirmed that he is running again for another term, despite growing calls for him to step down. Paul, this announcement on the eve of the World Cup no less has caught football's world governing body by surprise.
That's right, Charity. It's a complete U-turn from Sepp Blatter's earlier commitment that this fourth term, which expires May next year, would be his last. Senior European football officials are lashing out against this new stance, claiming the Football Association has been plagued with corruption scandals during his 16-year tenure. On the other hand, Blatter continues to enjoy strong support among FIFA delegates and associations, promising them even higher premiums from the World Cup profits. Speaking on Wednesday at FIFA's annual Congress, Blatter said his work wasn't over.
I know that my mandate will finish next year. On the 29th of May in Zurich, my mandate will finish as FIFA president. But my mission is not finished. Congress, my mission is not finished.
And the decision comes as the Football League is under heavy fire for allegations of bribery surrounding Qatar's winning bid for the 2020 World Cup. Chief Investigator Michael Garcia said he would release his final report of a 2-year investigation into alleged corruption among FIFA officials later this week. Chetty?
All right, Paul, good stuff there. Thank you very much, as always, and we'll see you again in just about 2 hours. And in weather conditions, tornado and Korea are not exactly the two words that you would normally put together in the same sentence, but we did actually this week because a tornado was spotted in Korea earlier this week. And now news of this twister coupled with thunderstorms and torrential rain in recent days has people asking if it all comes down to climate change. Shin Se-min tells us more.
The worst flooding in the Balkans in over a century. An unusually heavy hailstorm in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And exceptionally heavy snowstorms in the central United States. The effects of climate change are being seen across the globe through abnormal weather events, and Korea is no exception, as evidenced by the last few days. A tornado near Ilsan in Gyeonggi-do province this Tuesday was the first ever spotted on the mainland. The twister lasted for at least an hour, leaving a trail of destruction in its path, with at least 21 greenhouses destroyed. Tornadoes aside, other parts of the nation have had their own unique weather experiences this week, which include torrential rain and hail, both of which are unusual this time of year. Meteorologists say an unstable atmosphere is to blame. 5 kilometers above the nation, the air is currently at a temperature of minus 15 degrees. Early summer daytime conditions on the surface are generating rain clouds in the skies, leading to torrential rain and hail. For the immediate future, weather forecasts think there's no damaging storms this week. But climate experts worry that the recent events could be a sign of more worrying changes to come. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And as Semin just was talking about, we are experiencing abnormal conditions here in the country, and there were more reports of unusual weather conditions today. And for more and the latest, Kim Bo-kyung is standing by for us at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Teddy, earlier today, in fact, those in Gwangju experienced landspout, which is similar to a tornado. And all of this is a result of continued instability in the atmosphere. And adding on to that, the nation will gradually be at the edge of a high pressure front near Shanghai. So precipitation accompanied by strong winds and even hail at times will continue in the inland regions. An umbrella is a must when heading outdoors. Well, what a rainy week we've been having, but after tomorrow's round of rainfall, which will drop about 5 to 40 millimeters in most parts of the country, will most likely be the last one we'll have in a while. Taking a closer look at tomorrow's readings, afternoon showers are forecast for Seoul, while Daegu and Gwangju hit 27, Busan tops out at 24. On to other places, Daejeon and Jeju peak in the mid-20s, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang reach 18. That's all for me at this hour, and back to you, Teddy.
Thank you very much for that. And that does it for this edition of ARIRANG News at 8. Thanks for watching, and hope you can join us again at 10 p.m. Korea time.